Hi, this is Theodore Hanley D, and you're with Valley of the Dolly. I moved to Portugal about 3 months ago, and I wanted to do a quick video to talk about some of the pricing you encounter here in the European Union versus what you have in America. About 3 months before I moved to Europe, I was on a call with somebody who was already here in Portugal, and I said, are things more expensive in Portugal, or are they less expensive? And he said, oh, everything here is about 50% less expensive than it is in the United States. So I thought, once I get here, I'm going to stop and take a look at some of the actual pricing that you see when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the drugstore, when you go to the gas station, and see what are the real differences here. Because part of it is they're in euros, which is basically $1.20, $1.25 compared to the dollar. I'm using a ratio of 1.25 dollars per euro. So let's start out looking at some of the items you might buy at the grocery store. We're in the summer season right now, which means fruit, so I thought I would start with things like blueberries. It's considerably more expensive in Portugal to buy blueberries. So for the same 16 to 18 ounces, you're talking over $6.50 for blueberries versus $4 that I could find at a major US grocery store in the Southwest compared to a major Portuguese grocery store. If you're talking about raspberries, they're more expensive in the United States, and this is what I found on the flyer for that same grocery store chain in the Southwest United States versus Portuguese grocery store, so that's $9 versus $6.65 in Portugal. Something like strawberries, those again are really in season here in Portugal, so they're less expensive right now. It's $1.80 versus $2.25 in the United States for the same pound of berries. If you're talking about cherries, also again, not expensive here right now, great quality cherries in this time of the year. If you talk about something like avocados, they tend to be more expensive here, and the US has great sourcing for that kind of product. Onions were really about the same. They were a little bit more expensive in the United States in that comparison. Chicken is less expensive in the United States. Boneless pork of loin, that one I found more expensive in the United States for what was a comparable cut there. Milk was a little bit more in the United States, but the difference wasn't as much as what I anticipated. That was $3.29 versus $3.03 in Portugal here. Almond milk again, almost exactly the same price in the United States as it is in Portugal, a little over $6 per gallon for 64 ounces. Usually you would buy half a gallon, which would be about $3 on sale, if you could find that there in the United States. Butter, almost the same price again. I used a comparison of a name brand of butter in the United States versus a similar name brand in Europe, and they came out to be almost the same, and that's for 18 ounces of butter, about $4.50, $4.46, depending on which continent you were on. Eggs were more expensive here than they were in the United States. Not really a huge difference for a dozen eggs. That price that I found in the United States was, I think, extremely low for what you would normally find. Usually, I think it's usually $2 a dozen minimum before you start going into the range of organics, etc. These are not organic pricing. These are typical grocery store pricings. When you talk about bacon is not the same here in Portugal as what you would find in the United States. It's a similar product, but it's not exactly the same. And it's more expensive here than it is it's more expensive in the United States than it is here. But again, it's not exactly the same product. It's considerably more expensive here than it is there. Considerably more expensive in the United States than it is here in Portugal. Ice cream is considerably more expensive in Portugal at $5.63 for 48 ounces versus about $4 US. And these are for grocery store brands of ice cream. They're not super high-end ice cream. They're a branded grocery store level 48-ounce container of ice cream. If you're talking about, again, a branded 2-liter bottle of sweetened iced tea, that ran about $2 in the US, and it was $1.75 in Portugal. So the difference wasn't huge. but it was less expensive in Portugal. And clothing is another kind of typical, well, before we get into clothing, let's get into a couple other things here. Let's talk about detergent. So detergent by ounce, or not by ounce, but by portion, by load would be 9 cents in both locations. So basically the same cost. Olive oil, considerably more expensive in the US when you're buying a smaller bottle. You do get a savings in the United States when you buy a large bottle, but the variance here, and again, olive oil is sometimes a specialty product. You can find a wild range of pricing for that. Tuna is more expensive in Portugal than it is in the United States, but they do come in really incredible small tins, and there is an entire art exhibit just dedicated to the sardine and tuna tins that you see that stock the shelves here in Portugal. They're really incredible. Pasta, a little bit more expensive in the United States, 84 cents versus $1.10 for what's about 18 ounces. If you start talking about the little K-cups that you're using for espresso, this is for a retail chain in the United States versus one selling in Portugal, and those were more than double in the United States for what they were selling here in Portugal for some very similar product. For the coffee size, and this is not a K-cup, this is like a classic French roast. It's a 30 ounce or 1 kilogram bag here is what I was sizing this at, and that was almost double in the United States compared to what I was looking at in Portugal for the similar product. And usually it's actually a little bit more expensive than Portugal, but that was that pricing that I found here was a sale price as well. Yogurt, it's less expensive here in Portugal. This is for a Greek yogurt, 63 cents versus about $1 per individual quantity in the United States. If you're looking for a specialty product like a teriyaki glaze, something that you would use for cooking, those kind of things tend to be much more expensive here in Portugal than what you would pay in the United States. So we're talking for a 12-ounce bottle, it's $5.63 here in Portugal versus $3.19. And I think it's just because you have so many more stores in a city like Los Angeles or Las Vegas, San Diego, San Francisco that are selling these type of products, and there's a lot more competition than what you find here. Rustic French bread, you can get great breads, great assortment of breads. They're readily available in Portugal and considerably less expensive. And I think that when my friend said, oh, things are 50% less expensive, bread, yeah, it is considerably less expensive, close to 50% less, and really great bread. If you're talking about things you might get at the drugstore, something like eye drops, much more expensive here in Portugal. And this is really true of any kind of over-the-counter drug. Eye drops, lotions, etc. tend to be more expensive here than they are in the United States. So if you wanted to buy that same name brand version of eye drops, and you can have it delivered by Amazon, some other type of delivery service, they tend to run almost double here what it would be in the United States. If you go for a different brand, yes, you can drop that price down dramatically, but it's still more expensive here in Portugal considerably. I was able to find a US face lotion here in Portugal and also in the United States that the cost was basically the same, and that was something you would mail order. If you look at sunscreen for the face, it's a little bit more expensive in the United States for what is the same brand of face sunscreen. If you're looking for a body sunscreen at 200 milliliters, it's a little bit more expensive in Portugal, but you do have many of the same brands available in both locations, so it's not difficult for you to find what it is that you want when you're here. Clothing, this was interesting because I chose a European retailer of clothing, and in this particular case, looking at a t-shirt, it is almost exactly the same price that they charge in the US or in Europe, $43.75 in Portugal versus $45 in the US. And for pleated chino pants, it was $98.75 in Europe and $115 in the US. It was actually more expensive, and that's before tax in the United States. These pricings that I'm putting together here in the US do not include tax. Generally, the price that you pay in Europe euros out the door in Portugal. They're not adding tax or VAT on top of that. For shoes, again, they were a little bit less expensive. Trainers, white leather trainers in the United States were $135. They're selling the same pair here for $123.75, so $124. And this is something I think everybody wants to know, what is the difference in the cost of gas? Well, here in Portugal, they use by the liter as opposed to the gallon. So if you change that price, there's a number of liters that go into gallons. So a gallon of gas here is it's $7.57, it's almost $8. In the United States, the average price a few weeks ago was $3 a gallon. If you were in California, it was $4.22 a gallon. So you can see it's definitely more expensive in California to get gas than it is on the national average, but that's still, almost half the cost, or less than half the cost of what you're paying for gas here. And a lot of what you're paying for gas here is in taxes, a lot more so than what you're paying in the United States. If you're talking about diesel, $3 a gallon in the United States, a little over, and it's almost $7, $6.86 a gallon in Portugal. And in California, that price for diesel would be $4.19, I think, a gallon. So those are just some comparative pricings for things like gas and diesel, and clothing, a few things you might get at the drugstore or pharmacy, and some food items. So I'd love to do this again in a week or so with a new video, a new topic. If there's anything specific you have questions regarding finance or moving out of the country, please let me know. If you have other questions, please drop those comments below. If you see pricing in Portugal that is less than what I found, send me a DM so I can get a hold of that great deal. And I look forward to connecting with you again maybe in a week or so with a new video.